10:35. We're going to start the hearing on Senate Bill 545 today. Senator Erickson and Senator O'Shea are in the Medicaid expansion hearing that's taking place at 10:30 today. So we will begin this hearing with an overview from our reviser. Are you ready, Charles? We're ready for you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. Senate Bill 545 proposes an economic development program managed by the Secretary of Commerce that would provide broad sales tax exemptions for data centers in Kansas that make a minimum investment of at least $600 million and meet other requirements, including a requirement for new jobs. The exemptions would include sales tax on purchases of goods and services for construction or remodeling of the data center equipment, and other data center costs, electricity, and certain labor costs. The Secretary of Commerce would manage the program, as I mentioned. So, starting with the bill, Section 1 defines terms for purposes of the bill, and we'll just pass over that for the moment. Section 2 provides the requirements and process for a qualified firm, and that is a defined term. A qualified firm is a business or an affiliate that is registered with the Secretary of State that is engaged in data processing, storage, and dissemination. Provides that the requirements and process for a qualified firm to receive the sales tax exemptions. An investment is required, as I mentioned, of at least $600 million in the aggregate within the first 5 calendar years after commencement of construction of the data center. There's an option for an earlier date if it's specified in the agreement with the Secretary. The qualified firm must also create and maintain at least 20 new jobs at the data center within 2 calendar years after commencement of operations. Construction of the project must begin within 10 years of the date of the agreement with the Secretary, or an earlier date if it's specified in the agreement. If the qualified firm commits to these requirements and enters into an agreement with the Secretary of Commerce, the qualified firm will receive a sales tax exemption for eligible data center costs and all electricity used by the data center and labor services to install, apply, repair, service, alter, or maintain data center equipment. So let's take a look at the definition of data center costs. And that's in Section 1, it's defined on page 2. Eligible data center costs means expenditures for the development, acquisition, construction, operation of a data center, including development, engineering, design, acquisition of land or buildings, site improvements, construction, and operation of a data center, lease payments, and data center equipment. And data center equipment is also a defined term. So if we want to take a look at that, that's also in Section 1 there on pages 1 to 2. That term includes purchased or leased computer equipment, servers, software, modular data centers, installations and upgrades, electrical equipment, including substations, generators, and uninterruptible energy equipment, cooling, refrigeration, and air conditioning equipment, water conservation systems, fiber optic and cabling related to connecting distributed data center locations, monitoring and security equipment, and equipment used for administration. The term includes such property whether or not the property is affixed to or incorporated into real property. So, turning back to Section 2, Section 2 also provides for a process if the qualified firm breaches the terms or conditions of the agreement. There's a written notice required from the secretary. The qualified firm then has 120 days to cure the breach terms or conditions. If no cure occurs, the secretary may require repayment of all or a part of the amount of the sales tax exemption received by the qualified firm, terminate the exemption, or suspend all or part of the exemption until the breach is cured. The qualified firm must also agree to cooperate with audits by the by the Department of Revenue, if required by the Secretary of Commerce, and provide information to the Secretary for matters such as publication in the Economic Development Database, the Secretary's report to legislative committees, and the discretionary 5-year review by the Secretary, which we'll get to in a moment. The Secretary may conduct a review that's discretionary every 5 years of the qualified firm to ensure compliance with this act and the agreement. The Secretary of Commerce shall certify every 5 years to the Secretary of Revenue whether the qualified firm meets the requirements for eligibility for the sales tax exemption. The qualified firm shall provide the Secretary with all information reasonably necessary to determine eligibility. So we have that 5-year certification requirement. Section 2 provides for exceptions to disclosure under the Kansas Open Records Act for confidential information provided by the qualified firm to address eligibility questions, confidential financial information, trade secrets, that sort of thing. That's on page 4. Page 4, this section also provides that the Secretary may inspect books and records pertaining to eligibility and compliance during business hours, or on at least 60 days prior written notice. The Secretary of Commerce is to certify to the Secretary of Revenue when the qualified firm has met the conditions to receive the sales tax exemption, and also provide notice of any modification, suspension, or termination of the exemption. The bill grants the Secretary of Commerce and the Secretary of Revenue authority to adopt rules and regulations on page 5. Section 3 provides additional particulars regarding the sales tax exemption. The length of the sales tax exemption is going to vary based on the amount of the qualified firm's investment in a qualified data center. So an exemption for 30 years from the date of commencement of construction is allowed for the minimum required investment of $600 million. An investment of $800 million will result in an exemption for 40 years. And the sales tax exemption would be continued indefinitely for an investment of at least $1 billion. The sales tax exemption is not to be approved by the Secretary of Revenue unless the qualified firm has been certified by the Secretary of Commerce as meeting all requirements of the Act, any rules and regulations, and the agreement with the Secretary of Commerce. The Secretary of Revenue shall revoke, suspend, or modify the sales tax exemption as requested by the Secretary of Commerce upon notification that the qualified firm has been disapproved. Section 4, which is the bulk of this bill, I think about 39 pages, is an amendment to 793606, which is our statute governing exemptions from state sales tax. And you can see at page 44 where we have modified that statute to provide for the sales tax exemptions that are discussed in the bill. And that's what the bill does. Oh, there is a fiscal note, which you can take a look at. And the bill would become effective July 1st, 2024, if enacted.
Thank you, Charles. Committee, do you have any questions of the reviser? Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I was reading the whole bill, and sometimes I was confused because I thought the new sections are usually in italics, but even the new sections looked like they weren't on the bill as I was marking it up. For example, section number 6 on page 5, it says new section 3, but I tend to go to the italics first, but I had to. So is all of the bill new, or there's just parts of it that are new that you read out? Because it's not defined which one is new and which one is actually.
Yeah, so I guess when we have all new sections, we don't use italics. Everything in the bill is new text. It's all new sections, with the exception of Section 4, amending 793606.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Ware?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. How common is it that these large exemptions, and especially the indefinite one, how often do we do that? Do you know the history of that?
No, I probably would defer that to conferees. I think Commerce could probably answer those questions for you.
Senator Ware, would you like to wait till the conferees come up and then ask your question? Thank you. Committee, anybody else? Questions of the reviser? If not, we'll move on to the conferees. Sorry, our first proponent is Barbara Comstock, who's a former Congresswoman and Virginia legislator and advisor to Net Choice. And Barbara, you're here, but you have a video.
Yes.
That we're ready to gear up whenever you give Matthias.
Sure, why don't we go ahead and show that first then?
Do you want to introduce yourself, even though I gave you a short little introduction, and then we'll start the video?
Yes, good morning, Vice Chair Dietrich and members of the committee. I am here representing Net Choice, a trade association of the world's leading online businesses. I am Barbara Comstock, and before I served in Congress, I was in the Virginia General Assembly, where I introduced and passed bipartisan data center legislation that I'm going to discuss today. So we can go ahead and show that video, which shows a little bit about the data centers. So that might be easier to see that first before we discuss.
A short little introduction, and then we'll start the video.
Yes, good morning, Vice Chair Dietrich and members of the committee.
Than ever, Americans are depending on the internet to be informed, stay connected, and get their work done. Whether educating students, connecting with family, working from home, or participating in a virtual medical appointment, it's America's networks and data centers that enable all we're doing online today. Data centers are locations where computing and networking equipment is concentrated for the purpose of storing, processing, protecting, or distributing large amounts of data. Data centers keep many of the products you use every day up and running around the clock and around the world. That includes Netflix, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and countless others. 500 hours of video were uploaded every hour on YouTube, and Google handles over 3.5 billion searches per day, and Facebook has 3 billion people using its services every month. Data centers allow you to stay connected, informed, productive, and entertained. Data centers also create tech jobs in the areas where they're built. From construction teams and engineers to technicians and facility managers, these investments boost the local economy while ensuring a better online experience for Americans everywhere. A typical enterprise-scale data center is a $750 million investment. While being built, 1,200 construction workers earn over $100 million in pay and benefits. The 2-year construction project drives over $500 million through the local economy. After construction, a site hires 100 direct employees and supports another 300 local jobs for services like security and maintenance, generating almost $200 million in annual economic activity. And America's largest tech firms have made public commitments to buy renewable energy for their data centers. Data centers generate tens of millions of dollars in state and local taxes and are strong supporters of education and broadband expansion. To thousands of data center workers nationwide, thank you for allowing us to stay connected, informed, productive, and entertained.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Now that video was made during the pandemic, about 1920, so all of those figures, have gone up higher than that. So It's a little bit more on all of those. But before I served in the Congress, as I mentioned, I passed this legislation in the Virginia General Assembly that opened the door to billions in investment in Virginia, and now Virginia is the #1 data center location in the world. So today we are asking for your support for SB 545 in order for Kansas to have the same type of opportunity for hyperscale data centers. You've seen what they can do, but no hyperscale data center has located in states that impose sales tax on data center equipment. The legislation that you have here would allow you to do that. So, and the legislation would be 600, it would go to $600 million, and if, when you invest that type and at least create 20 new jobs. Not every state has the factors that attract data center investment. While you have a deep talent pool and availability of affordable land and reliable energy, proximity to airports and strong community partners, what's missing is that same tax treatment for equipment that Kansas already offers for other capital-intensive industries like manufacturing and agriculture. So tech industry facilities and data centers are #1 in terms of capital investment in the U.S. A recent report showed that they're the top growth sector for U.S. capital investment, and it's increased by 720% since 2007. In fact, 4 of the top 6 capital investment companies, Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, and Microsoft, invested $94 billion in 2022, more than energy, telecom, pharma, or manufacturing. This investment trend will continue, but only in states that make that long-term data center investment a possibility. So you can see on page 3 of testimony is Meta's data center campus outside of Columbus, Ohio. The initial investment structure there was 970,000 square feet and cost $750 million. That construction brought $244 million to the local supply chain, 1,200 construction workers that earned $78 million in wages. Across the street, Google was building a $600 million facility that was 275 square foot data center on 440 acres. In states like Missouri, Iowa, Ohio, Illinois, and Nebraska, data centers have been major drivers of investment. A 2022 report showed significant results from a growing data center sector. Data center projects under construction will increase investment in Iowa by over 50%. Apple is constructing a $1.3 billion data center. Meta Platforms are doubling its current footprint, and Microsoft is doubling its current footprint with 2 new campuses. So similarly in Nebraska, a 2022 report showed equally impressive economic impacts, and you can see all of this in our longer testimony where Meta Platforms is completing a $6-building data center that was announced in 2018, in addition of 4 buildings to the campus announced in 2021, and then Google is completing new data centers that were announced in 2019. So when looking at this legislation, what we do is encourage you to adopt what we call a here versus not here analysis when extending the sales tax exemption that you have for manufacturing, farming, and mining production. And this analysis recognizes the reality that no hyperscale data center has located in states that impose sales tax burdens on data center equipment. So if you look at the chart that we have on page 5 of our testimony, and you can see some of the economic benefits of data centers that come when you have them that you wouldn't have otherwise. And it's things such as income and spending by those construction workers and contractors, revenue for local suppliers, contractors, lodging and restaurants, high-tech training and experience for the workforce, and that makes the state more attractive for tech business and education. And then on page 6, it also shows some of the incremental tax revenue opportunities that also come from data center construction and operations, such as personal income taxes paid by employees and contractors in the industry, corporate income taxes from data center operators and contractors, sales taxes on non-exempt equipment and supplies, sales taxes on services related to tangible personal property, and of course, local real estate and personal property taxes. Now in Virginia, from the sales tax exemptions that I passed back in, I guess it was 2012, in 2019, a Virginia commission evaluated the tax incentives for data centers using the confidential tax information, and the tax review concluded that 90% of the investment in data centers would not have occurred in Virginia were it not for those tax exemptions. Now, of course, that was assuming that it would have been there otherwise, when of course we're saying that it wouldn't have been. But they were assuming in that study, well, that it would have been there. And of course, it wouldn't have been, but they assumed, okay, we would have gotten, that 90% wouldn't have been there. And so they said, instead those investments would have been, and 90% would have gone elsewhere. But then that wasn't even including the local impact. And to give you some examples of the tax and tech education benefits from data centers just in one county, a county that I represented, Loudoun County, Virginia, in Northern Virginia, they did a report that property tax revenue from data centers by 2023, just in one county, was $735 million in 2023. So that, now Loudoun County is the largest data center county in the world. And that was $624 million from personal property tax, because as you can see in our testimony, and you can see from how large those data centers were in that video, they're like football size data centers, but they can be, in rural areas, they can be, out, wherever you decide your economic development folks decide they want to be, but they are all over Virginia, and they're, in Iowa, elsewhere. And these taxes have allowed Loudoun County to reduce its real property tax by 41 cents, while still spending millions of new dollars for roads, schools, and public services. Loudoun's data center tax revenue has been growing steadily since 2016, when that figure was only $146 million. So you can see how rapidly and exponentially that grew. And during this time, the data center industry partnered with our community colleges to develop a data center operations program that they were partners with and helped pay for, offering associate's degrees in engineering technology, which was a 26-credit career studies certificate. I believe it was just a 2-year program, in data center operations classes, and people who had previously been in low-paying fields are now making $80,000 to $100,000 in data center jobs. And also companies who build and operate data centers in Loudoun County, such as Amazon Web Services, also offer on-the-job training, which pays $20 to $28 an hour for a 12-week data center training class for entry-level data center technician jobs. So this is, they just advertise, like, come and take our 12-week program, and we'll pay you $20 to $28 an hour to come and learn how to be a technician in this area. You don't have to have any experience, so high school level jobs. And then recently, Google, which has 3 data centers in Northern Virginia, 2 of them in Loudoun County, did a study that showed between 2017 and 2022 that direct, indirect, and induced contributions to this area yielded $1.1 billion to GDP and $330 million in direct, indirect, and induced labor income, and 3,500 jobs. So while Virginia adopted policies to become the largest data center market in the world, the landscape for attracting data centers has changed quite a bit, because it used to just be 5 states that had these tax incentives. Today it's over 30, as you can see on page 8 of our testimony. The map shows where all these tax incentives are now. So in your region recently, Missouri enacted a 15-year data center sales tax exemption, which now has a 10-year extension. So they've been able to attract a large Meta data center to Kansas City. And Google recently acquired a property in Kansas City for a potential data center. Illinois enacted a data center exemption in 2019 and saw $4.2 billion in data center investment, plus a recent $4.3 billion announcement. Ohio updated its data center program in 2019 and attracted enterprise data center investment from Amazon, Google, and Meta. Wisconsin enacted a permanent exemption on equipment and electricity for large data centers in July of 2023. So we would certainly like to see Kansas to adopt this legislation so they can join this $94 billion investment that's obviously going to continue to grow. So thank you for your time, and welcome your questions after my colleagues' testimony and at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Barbara. We will hear from the other two proponents, but they're here in person. But thank you so much for being here, and we will come back to questions as soon as everyone's had a chance to visit with us. Thank you so much, and welcome to Kansas and the Senate.
And it was on my map. I did it with my granddaughter, and I still had about 4 states, so it's great to be here.
Happy to have you. Second Comparee, Brad Smoot. Would you want to come up and introduce yourself?
I'd love to. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Brad Smoot. I also represent NetChoice. Pleased to be here. It's been a lot of years since I've had the opportunity to testify in front of the Commerce Committee. You did such a slick and efficient job of handling the workers' compensation bill this year. Congratulations that I didn't even have to appear, and I've been taking a lot of ribbing from certain members of this committee for not having made an appearance, so that's the principal reason I'm here. The second reason is I thought as I looked through this bill, this is an opportunity for the state of Kansas and one that I think maybe deserves kind of a little bit of a local slant to it. You have a good description from your staff on what's in the bill. You have a great description from Barbara about the potential financial benefits to the state and what's going on across the country and why 33 other states are already in this business and in this space trying to capture this type of investment in their state. But I'd like to do something a little bit different, and that's kind of talk about this from the standpoint of what you often see as members of tax committee or members of economic development committee over the years. This bill is distinguishable from so much of what you see because of the facts as well as the law. And I think maybe a little bit of cost-benefit analysis or thinking on this will get us to where we can see the benefits even more clearly. If you take a look at the 2024 bill index, there's a page and a half of legislation for sales tax exemptions, 57 bills to be exact at my last look. Some of those are duplicates. They're not all exactly the same. Many of them have a great deal of merit that you'll get to sift through. Some of them are advancing in the legislature. They involve things from lifting the sales tax on food indefinitely in response to Senator Ware's question. We actually do some sales tax exemptions indefinitely. Others may only be for a limited project. Lots of variety in what the legislature's looked at over the years. That's why we probably have at least 100 sales tax exemptions. It's a perennial issue, as many of you are quite well aware. But these bills, there's 2 of them on the data center. The one in the House has already passed, House Bill 2450, passed the House committee. And this bill, 545, appears before you today. The fundamental difference is that this bill involves dollars we're not currently getting. Most of those 57 bills that you're looking at involve things that we're taxing today, sales transactions that would get taxed today under current law. So you're literally taking money out of the state general fund when you pass one of those tax exemptions. That's not the case here. There are no data centers here. There will not be any data centers here unless you pass Senate Bill 545, because they have too many options to go somewhere else. 33 other states and counting are in the business of creating these types of opportunities by eliminating the sales tax, so that those businesses and those investments and the resulting tax dollars will appear in their states. So when you think about this and try to put, where the dollar's coming from, where they're going, these are dollars that we don't have now, that you're not pulling out of the state general fund. These are dollars that you will forego should anyone decide to invest $600 million or $800 million or $1 billion or more in multiple tax centers or data centers in various areas of the state of Kansas. Secondly, unlike numerous other economic development incentives, Kansas has or is considering, things like HPIP, the Apex bill that you passed a couple of years ago, training income tax credits, refundable tax credits, those types of things. This bill only has one tax feature, a sales tax exemption. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles that we often see in commerce-related proposals relating to a specific business, not just an industry, but a drilling down to the specific owner who comes to the state and wants particular tax modifications or benefits. This is for an entire industry of opportunities for the state of Kansas, and the only incentive here is the sales tax. That means millions of state tax dollars are not required up front for an event or for a project or for a particular thing. It's only when the Department of Commerce certifies that we have a data center that wants to come spend hundreds of millions of dollars in the state of Kansas does this tax exemption take effect. It's future money that the legislature is considering foregoing in order to get these millions and millions of dollars in tax investment. The tax benefits of this, in addition to the obvious investment in the state, result in the locales, because you still get your property tax on the business buildings that are being built. It's sales tax on other things that get purchased that are not excluded from taxes on here. It's income taxes. It's taxes for the jobs and the multiplier jobs that result from this type of large investment. So the state benefits in terms of its taxes because of the investment that's being made here. Thirdly, we've had some questions and interest in the issue of electricity. This bill exempts electricity from sales tax. That's not at all unlike, as Barbara mentioned, what we do for electricity consumed in the manufacture, production, and processing of tangible personal property. It's a very similar type of a request that's being made here to put that in there, because this is consumed in the storage of data. The electricity is essential to the storing, and therefore it's consumed. They're quite large users. And that's why the utilities last year in the House committee, and again this year, we've discussed with the utilities their interest in this. They're very supportive. And the reason is that it tends to level the grid use. It tends to spread the cost. Large users are easier to service than smaller units, so it's more efficient. And you put that together with the economic development results of this. This is a good way to stabilize and lower consumer utility costs in the electric utility arena. Attached to my testimony should be a kind of a one-pager. I tried to simplify it as is my fashion. Under the category of costs, I don't see any cost. There are no upfront costs, no tax credits. All we're doing is foregoing sales tax we wouldn't get otherwise. So I don't see any cost if you pass the bill. I don't see any cost if you don't pass the bill. So I view that as equal and neutral. But in the benefit category, I see that all the benefits that we've listed there that I've belabored already are listed if you pass the bill. There are no benefits if you don't pass the bill. So for me, the cost-benefit analysis was pretty darn simple. You're literally playing with house money. This is money that you will not get if you aren't able to enact this type of legislation, but it creates enormous opportunity for investment as well as tax dollars to the state and local units of government if you are able to pass this. I was trying to think of an analogy, and I struggled with it quite a bit, but if you can imagine somebody wanting to pay me millions of dollars, and all I have to do is give up my opportunity to earn money from the NBA, that'd be a no-brainer, and it'd make a lot of sense to do that. That's kind of where we are here. There's no chance that anybody is going to move their data centers here when they have so many other opportunities unless we do something like this. So here's our chance to get some great economic growth, great economic development, and alternative tax revenues by simply taking certain things off the roll into the future. I'm happy to stand for questions, Madam Vice Chair, at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Our final proponent, Robert Johnson, and we want to save time for questions, so could you be brief?
I can. My comments are a bit shorter here. Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Bob Johnson. I appreciate the opportunity to be here in support of SB 545. I am a shareholder at a Kansas City-based national law firm with over 1,000 attorneys and offices in 23 cities coast to coast. That's relevant because while my practice focuses on economic development projects nationally, regionally, and certainly with an emphasis in Kansas, our diverse client base, national footprint, and wide-ranging areas of practice have provided me a lens through which to understand what is required to attract and retain the most competitive economic development projects in advanced technology, advanced manufacturing, research and development, and many other industries we seek to attract to Kansas. I see this in my practice every day personally, and I see it in the practice of my partners throughout the country. And believe from that perspective, I can speak today as to the importance of this bill in Kansas. In particular, it is critical that companies have access to the infrastructure needed to thrive in Kansas. For the most innovative companies, that means data storage infrastructure in close proximity to their facilities. I certainly, in my practice, have been privy to inquiries by data center companies looking to locate in Kansas, but this is a critical make-or-break issue for them. This is something we need to adopt in order for those companies to make the decision to close on the land that they have options on and to move forward with the type of investment we want to see in this state. And I'll take a bit of a different tack than my co-presenters here. While I do concur with all of their comments, I think they were well put. I think it is no secret that data centers themselves are not major job producers. They don't produce thousands and thousands of jobs. While data center jobs are high-skilled and high-paying, it is not the jobs at the data center itself that should be the primary focus. Rather, the build-out of hyperscale data centers will position Kansas to attract the type of companies that rely on these data centers as the brain of the future economy. Large users of data benefit by being located in close proximity to where their data is stored. Since latency increases the farther a user is from the servers in which that data is housed, it is critical for our nation's most innovative technology companies to be located near hyperscale data centers. Indeed, with the expectation that artificial intelligence will play a fundamental role in tomorrow's economy, the location near a company's servers will be essential for companies in nearly all of our innovative industries that we seek to attract, maintain, and grow in Kansas. Given the floor set by SB 545 of $600 million of capital investment by any eligible firm, which would compare to Missouri's level of $25 million, so really what we're focused on here is exactly those major data centers that are needed by large data users that this bill will incentivize. There are no hyperscale data centers in states that have not already passed a similar sales tax exemption, as my co-presenters pointed out. The many states that have passed similar exemptions, such as Missouri, Oklahoma, Iowa, and others, have already attracted those major capital investments that Ms. Comstock and Mr. Smoot spoke to. In fact, I can't fault Ms. Comstock for this because it came through on my phone as I was sitting there, but Google announced within the hour that they are going to commit $1 billion investment that will produce 100 operating jobs and 1,200 construction jobs in the Northland of Kansas City, Missouri. That's the kind of investment we need in Kansas, not in Missouri. Missouri's adopted that exemption. That enabled them to attract that project as well as the Meta project to the Northland. We cannot continue to miss out on those projects in the state of Kansas. Thus, that is why I say that it's a make or break requirement for technology companies and data center operators because of the constant reinvestment in equipment necessary to run these centers. That's why the time period needs to be longer with regard to the exemption, because the equipment needs to be replaced continually in these facilities, not only because it ages and burns out, but also because the technology is rapidly advancing. And as AI and cloud computing advance and grow ever more central to our economy in the coming decade, the demand for more server space and newer technologies by Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta, Apple, and many other emerging technology leaders we're not focused on today because they either don't exist or because they are fledgling companies or not yet household names. Their needs will escalate and the demand will continue to increase. Now, this increase in demand for sophisticated cooling technology and other investment in the inner workings of data centers will require that sales tax exemption to make the development and long-term operation of these facilities pencil. That demand far exceeds supply for data center development nationwide. Again, a trend that will only continue to escalate as AI and cloud computing demand ever-increasing computing power. The demand is already crowded around our nation's population centers, but astronomical land prices where the current location of these large users is focused has made developing new centers in those areas cost prohibitive. That is why the time is now for Kansas to capitalize on the trend of data center development migrating away from the coastal markets, moving to places with strong infrastructure, skilled workforce, and more reasonable cost structures. We have all of those economic development pillars in Kansas. And if we build the data storage infrastructure, the headquarters of innovative companies we seek to attract will follow. Our regional competitors have recognized this, such as Missouri, and incentivized large data centers that are open or under construction. Adoption of SB 545 will ensure Kansas is no longer left out of consideration for attraction of these data centers and ultimately and critically the end users that need to store their data there. Without SB 545, as Mr. Smoot pointed out, it is exceedingly unlikely there will be significant data center development in Kansas, certainly of the scale that would be required for eligibility under this legislation. Without SB 45, I do want to reemphasize that the sales tax that is exempted by this statute would not otherwise materialize, nor would the positive benefits from the data center development that I spoke to previously. I believe this bill, I've read it, I think it is narrowly tailored, a well-designed tool, well-written to attract development that will bring more innovative companies, direct and indirect sales tax, income tax, property tax revenues, and highly skilled jobs. Again, to reemphasize, data centers are the brain of the future economy. The time is now to seize on the significant demand that is there today so that Kansas isn't left behind. It means something to me as a Kansan myself and as someone who practices in economic development in this state that we capitalize on the economic development opportunities in front of us, especially those that are not only fundamental to what's there today, but what will be there for the decades to come to make sure Kansas is there and succeeding in the way we already have and the way that we deserve to in this state. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
Thank you, Bob, for your testimony. We have one document written in support of the bill from Greg Kendall, President, Wyandotte Economic Development Council. I have no opponents. I have no neutral. So we will open this then for questions from the committee. We have about 10 minutes. So I'll go Senator Ware, Senator Dahl, Senator Schallenberger, that order. You may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this goes, I guess, to our fellow legislator, former legislator. On your chart here, or the map, you have it broken down into 3 levels: permanent, 20-year, and less than 20-year exemptions. Like Wisconsin, for instance, that's listed on the back, it's a permanent exemption, but it's only equipment and electricity and not nearly as broad as what we're looking at potentially for Kansas. So I'm wondering if you can give us the information state by state, which categories are tax exempt, so that we can really look at an apples and apples comparison?
But we could, I think really because the market is so competitive these days, like Wisconsin wanted to be more competitive. So as each state is looking at this, each state is trying to be more competitive, like making it, depending on what their other advantages are. So, yeah, it's hard to go through all 33 of these in that
Barbara, is that-
capacity now.
Right,
May, is
I
that-
know I'm asking for a lot, but
Senator Ware, do you think she could give us that information at a later point in time? So
Oh,
we
that'd be
have
great.
that?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to maybe get more detail on that.
That would be
But
great.
some of it depends on what the state itself has in terms of its advantages and what their underlying tax structure is. But Kansas does have a very business-friendly climate in general, which is why
We will be
we've been
meeting
looking.
tomorrow. Do you think you might be able to give us some tentative data
Yes.
by tomorrow?
Yes,
Perfect.
I'll see
Would
what-
that work, Senator Ware?
that would be great, thank you.
Thank you. Did you have any other questions?
I did, actually. Because we're hearing so much about electricity, and almost any place in Kansas, I've never been on the Utilities Committee, so I don't understand all the ins and outs of all that. But it seems to me that it would take a lot of build-out, a lot of upgrade of the capacity for electricity. And my question is, who will end up footing that bill?
I have a study that we can also submit, actually in Loudoun County, that a study that Google that I mentioned did, but these companies also are very active in doing alternative energy. They get very involved in wind and solar. They are very committed to being carbon neutral, and so I can give the committee information on that. For example, Google has committed to be carbon neutral by 2030, so they have a lot. I can give you more detail on that I can submit to the committee.
Well, I'm all about alternative energy. I'm
And also
concerned-
with water, so the report that I have that I can give you has a lot of detail, and since Loudoun County has a lot of data centers, they have a lot of experience in that too, that I think will be helpful with a lot of detailed information.
That would be great. There's still going to be upfront costs. And my concern is,
Well, and that's what the companies work in doing that themselves too.
Thank you.
be
Senator, thank
lovely.
you very much. Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You answer this as much as anybody. So we have a data center already in Kansas City, Missouri. We're putting a new one in northern Kansas City, Missouri. Where was this, I know you don't have a specific spot yet. Where are we looking? What area?
Well, yeah, and then you might.
I'm sure it's around Kansas City. So here's my question. Do we have the transmission lines and the infrastructure to handle, we're going to have 3 new data centers. It sounds like this is the new thing coming in. I know our transmission lines out, there's got to be an overload here somewhere.
If you'd want to step to the mic and introduce yourself and answer that question, that'd be great.
Brad Smoot, and I'll try to answer it as best I can.
First of all, you were about ready to say it was a great question, right?
I did. It was a great question.
I liked it.
Absolutely a great question. These data centers can go in a lot of places. They will be going where the company figures out that they've got the infrastructure that matches their need. Barbara and I were discussing just this morning a huge one that was built in a rural area in southern Virginia next to the North Carolina border. It's conceivable you could have these in southeast Kansas. even though they're not necessarily close to large metropolitan areas. You've got Joplin and Springfield and Tulsa, and you've got affordable land in southeast Kansas.
I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about transmission lines. How are we going to get the power to and out?
Well, I think again, the companies will look to where that's available. And if it's not available and it's an overload, they're not going there. So that would be my answer. You may have a better one, but I think there are going to be plenty of places in Kansas to choose from, and the utility companies are going to be eager to meet that need.
If you'd like to add to that, would you introduce yourself? And
If I may, yes. Bob Johnson, Polson Law Firm. Thank you, Senator, for asking the question. Just in my experience, working with large manufacturers or data centers looking at sites in Kansas, they essentially shoulder most of the cost. They pay for, through their rates or deals that they cut with Evergy, build out of expansive new transmission lines, substations oftentimes, which are very expensive, but then ultimately fall on those large users. I think Mr. Smoot pointed out well that those costs are largely defrayed by the large users. And so in working with these data center developers and operators, it is part of their capital investment plan for a large investment in infrastructure if that's needed. I think that wouldn't rule out, if that infrastructure isn't there today, would not rule out a decision for a data center to be located in rural Kansas, in Wichita, throughout the state. They will invest with Evergy. I think Evergy is well aware this is coming. They are participating in those Missouri projects to build out very quickly substations and transmission lines to serve these facilities.
yes, and then we'll have Senator Schallenberger and
Those are extremely expensive. I don't see any incentives here about transmission lines anywhere. So that's going to be on Evergy. So is that going to impact the cost of everybody else because they're going to have to, because that's expensive.
Mr. Smoot, if you want to speak to this, you were referencing, I am certainly not an expert on how Evergy structures their rate distribution. I'll just again reemphasize that they often, in these large users, they make deals with these groups so that much of that cost is defrayed by those users to build out additional transmission lines or substations or other infrastructure needed for the facility. So I think Evergy is very sensitive, obviously, to raising rates on Kansans generally, and I think, yes, that's right, and they should be, and I respect that, as do the data centers that we're talking to for my clients. They know that they will have to make a significant investment themselves in that electricity infrastructure so that Evergy is able to continue to provide low rates to Kansans.
thank you. Senator Schallenberger.
Thank you. Just a couple quick answers would be better than these long ones. So now I forgot my question. Do these companies ask, you're in here for a sales tax exemption. We give sales tax exemption if you're in the manufacturing business. So if you were making widgets, you wouldn't need this. We don't. What do we give sales tax exemptions for? Machinery and equipment used?
Senator Tyson, do you want to answer that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Madam Chairman, and Senator, I've heard that statement a couple of times. That's not accurate. In Kansas, there's a sales tax exemption on utilities for agriculture and personal, but there is no sales tax exemption on utilities for corporations or businesses.
I was asking about the
Or
equipment.
manufacturing.
So the equipment,
The manufacturing and equipment property tax exemption, we do give that.
but not a sales tax exemption.
Not a sales tax exemption for utilities. And that's what these guys are asking.
So if I've
They're
got,
asking to be carved out so that they have an exemption that no other business has.
so if I'm Boeing and I want to buy some machinery, I pay sales tax on that. My question was machinery.
Go ahead,
We'll
Senator Schellenberger.
ask another question. Do these, so you've decided to come, we've given you this break, so now do you go to the counties and try to get a property tax exemption, or do they not do that? That's a no is a good, quick answer. Okay.
That's why, like, as I mentioned,
Would you want to introduce yourself again? For those-
Barbara Comstock with Net Choice. No, and that's why this county that I cited, that 734 million in Loudoun County that I mentioned, that's
So
from
you
the
believe
property
this is
tax.
the only exemption, well, it's not only, it's not small, but that this exemption is enough to get these people to come?
Yes, no, and that's why all those in the here versus not here charts that are in the testimony, those are all the other taxes that are coming in for the counties and for the
Okay,
state.
okay, thank
So
you.
all those taxes are from that, yes.
Last question, Senator Reddy. And Senator Tyson, did you have a quick one? Okay, let's go with Senator Reddy, and then we'll come right back to you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a few concerns about the bill. I think, you know, what we saw with Panasonic when we did the investment in that, I was not here for that conversation, but what we saw is the trickling effects of having another police station or another fire station, housing and such. Although the employees here are minimal, 10 to 20 at best, because it's a data center. One of my concerns is what is that impact, financial impact, where now cities or counties have to have a different type, another station of some kind? Can you speak to that?
You want to introduce
Barbara
yourself?
Comstock again with Net Choice. That's what the example that I was giving in Loudoun County with just 3 data centers that Google did. The impact was 1.1 billion in economic impact that they were giving. So there was not, because there aren't many employees, it's all it's a give back. There isn't an impact like they actually give money to build schools, to build fire stations. So there isn't a need to, have to, create new things for them. It's the end, you're kind of hitching your wagon to, a money maker, not a taker.
Thank
And it's a unique, in my experience in legislation, this was, I know, in the state legislature, it's not like Congress, you have to balance your budgets, you have to come up with something that creates money, and this was unique in my experience in the state government, where you don't find many things where you don't have to put money up front. These tax incentives were something that when you put them in place, then if they come, it generates money, and from year one, when they came, it started generating money on the state end, and then it was generating money on the local end, and we didn't have to put out any money. There were state deals that we often did where we were putting in money and then we hoped things came, and they didn't, and we lost money. But this was a unique situation where I've been out of government for 10 years, and the biggest line item in Loudoun County that's generating money is at $734 million, and I haven't been there for 10 years.
Thank you. One follow-up, and then Senator Tyson, and then we're going to close our hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my next question is, it's a little uncomfortable to give tax incentive, sales tax 30 years, 40 years, and then indefinitely. If the committee decides to move forward with this, I would like an amendment of some kind, and let me see, asking you to reduce it to 10 years and take a review if it's working or not.
Barbara Comstock again. Well, because so many states have these now, and as I was mentioning, it's about tax certainty and competitiveness, and the reason more states have gone to the longer times and permanent is because of the competitiveness. Whether it's on, the national level or the state level, having tax certainty, it's a business. When businesses are looking to make business decisions, when you're making $1 billion decision, you're putting these things in place. If they don't know that that's going to be in place, it's hard to make that decision. So that's how these businesses make those decisions, is will this be in place for a long time? And that's on, any decision when states are looking at, when you hear about states, businesses not going to certain states, it's because they're not as business-friendly as other states. So
Thank you.
you will have a business-friendly state here otherwise.
Tyson, last question. Senator Tyson?
Thank you. Madam Chairman, so I have two quick questions. One of them is, instead of asking for a carve-out, why didn't you guys show up for Senate Bill 54 that passed out of the Senate Tax Committee? It's below the line now. It would exempt all sales tax on utilities for all businesses. And that would be my first question.
Would someone like to respond to that?
Were you-
Bob Johnson. That wouldn't include the sales tax exemption on the equipment, which is the critical piece here, given
It's already exempt because of the machinery and equipment.
it wouldn't be in this case for the servers that they need to continually buy over the long life period of these facilities, which is also why the exemption needs to be longer in place so that they can continue to reinvest in the facility.
So instead of a complete exemption for all businesses for sales tax exemption for all businesses, you want a special carve-out for you guys?
I would absolutely be a proponent of that bill as well.
Well, it's below the line. Leadership can bring it above the line at any time. So I've not heard any comment from you guys on it. The other thing I would ask is, do you live in Kansas?
I do.
Okay. I wanted to know because the other conferee does not live in Kansas and they kept saying Kansas needs this. And I'm like, why do you think that Kansas needs this? So thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, committee. Thank you for conferees who are here today. Appreciate the information and your presence. Tomorrow, I will close the hearing. Committee, tomorrow we will be meeting. We'll be working 4 bills. You have that agenda in front of you, 1620, possibly 2483, 2648, and 545. Thank you very much. Committee adjourned.